Good day, everyone. My name is Walrus H. Arombo, and our group are assigned to discuss about the historical perspective on abnormal psychology, specifically the prehistoric perspective on abnormality, and the ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome perspective in abnormality. So our group decided to have an introduction, which I was assigned, in order for us to introduce first our what is abnormal psychology before we will go to the prehistoric perspective and ancient Greece and Rome perspective. So before that, we have prepared an icebreaker for us to be energized before we will be discussing this topic. So, okay, let's do our icebreaker. Then, our topic outline is abnormal psychology, psychological disorder, prehistoric perspective on abnormality to be expounded by the second reporter, the ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome perspective in abnormality to be expounded by the third reporter. So, reminder that our overview or introduction, in our overview and introduction, we might be encountering a topic that is already discussed by Mom Teen, or we already watched it in the previous video, so we will just have an overview or a review about it. So the intended learning outcome in our report is to understand abnormal psychology, psychological disorder, the prehistoric perspective on abnormality, and ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome perspective in abnormality. Okay, so first is, what is abnormal psychology? So abnormal psychology is a model of psychological study of the abnormal human behavior. So it is a clinical applications focused on defining, classifying, explaining, and providing clinical sound treatments for the many illnesses that fall under the abnormal behavior classification. It is according to Hansel and Moore 2008. Understanding modern-day theories of abnormal psychology requires consideration of the origins, theoretical models, and evolution related directly to abnormal behavior. So in order for us to understand what is abnormal psychology, it is important to trace back to its origin so that we can say that, okay, it happened this way because, ganyan. So tracing back in its origin can help us to understand what is abnormal psychology. So one major difficulty in studying the origins and continuation of abnormal psychology is the definition of what is normal behavior and what is normal behavior from abnormal behavior, because behavior is a product of various influences like cultural differences and societal views, which researchers must account for these differences and look at past behavior of an individual. So, looking back, abnormal behavior has been recorded already on biblical times, described as similar to modern cases as schizophrenia and depression. So, diba? During biblical times, it is already, abnormal behavior has been already recorded. Yet, until now, people will assume that an individual that has that needs attention, or that needs, what do we call that, like uh, treatments, we call it, ay, okay, nabuang naman na siya kay something ganyan. We tend to label them as something that they are not, whereas before they already consider it as an abnormal behavior, but now it is easily for us to judge, like if someone like napasmuhan, ganyan. So it is something that should be developed. Okay, so during early culture, one of the earliest explanation of abnormal behavior in early cultures was a condition known as animism. So animism is the belief that natural phenomena or inanimate objects are alive or possess lifelike characteristics, because early humans regarded many issues as an act of spirit work. A person suffering from mental illness will be considered to be possessed by the devil or malevolent spirits. So treatments Wow. Treatments is first is the trepanation, where holes were drilled into the patient's skull to release the possessing spirit. And number two is the exorcism, which is a ritualistic practice or religious authorities where it used to cast out evil spirits. So I will not be more expounding this topic because it will be expounded by the next reporter. So another major influence on the origins of abnormal psychology is connected to early Greek. So is the theory of Hippocrates, which he believed that mental illness or abnormalities were the result of the imbalance of four fluids that believed to circulate the human body. So treatments were dietary and behavioral modification, which is designed to return the proper balance of the fluids. So it will be further discussed by the third reporter. So in identifying what is abnormal, it really started in our society because of stigma. Okay, so we label someone as nabuang because of the stigma that grows in our society. So what is stigma? Stigma is the destructive beliefs and attitudes held by society that are ascribed to groups considered different in some manner, such as people with mental illness. So there are four characteristics of stigma. So number one, which label is applied. So a label is applied to a group of people that distinguishes them from others. Example is crazy. So first is the first characteristic of uh, stigma. So it is how we label someone that would distinguish them from others. So for example, is crazy. Next is label refers to undesirable attributes. So the label is linked to deviant or undesirable attributes by the society. Example, crazy people who are dangerous. Okay, so the label crazy by uh, an adjective which is dangerous. So that is the second characteristic of stigma. Next is people with label are seen as different. People with the label are seen essentially different from those people without the label, contributing to us versus them mentally. Example, we are not like those people. Diba? Crazy people, first is we label them as crazy. Next is crazy people who are dangerous. And then we like divide ourselves from them. For like we're saying that we are not like those people. Okay? So the last one is people with the label are discriminated against. People with a label are discriminated against unfairly. Example, clinical crazy people can be built in our neighborhood. So it's like saying that those people who are crazy should be terminated from your neighborhood since you feel that they are dangerous. Okay, so that is what is stigma and the four characteristics of stigma. So this stigma grows because society uh, uh, keeps on doing it. Okay, don't tell me that in your neighborhood you will never hear someone who will say like napasmuhan, nabuang, ay layuin na siya kay makasakit, ganyan. So, uh, like, like, making the stigma, not stopping the stigma is already a contribution of, of letting people differentiate someone who needs medical attention. Okay? So, instead na dapat in our society, instead that we will help that stigma to grow, we should be the one na parang stop siya. We should break the stigma in our society. Okay? Because it is not good. It is not good because instead of helping the people who needs help, you are you are like ano tawag dyan? You are just parang dumadagdag sa mga tao na nagstigmatize ng mga tao na kailangan ng tulong. So, now let us differentiate normal and abnormal behavior. So, it is an accepted definition of defining normal and abnormal behavior. So, one major problem that faces researchers is the definition and classification of abnormal behavior. So, in defining normal from abnormal, it depends upon on cultural context of an individual. So, your culture has in your culture you might consider it as normal, but in other culture it is not normal. For instance is yung alam niyo yung tribe na meron silang mga malalaki na earrings. So for them it is part of their culture, so it is normal for them, but for other culture it is not normal for them. So this saw it as an abnormal behavior. So what is normal behavior? Normal behavior refers to expected behavior in an individual. So what when you say expected behavior, so it is a behavior that is expected in your culture. So if then its opposite is abnormal behavior. It refers to behavior patterns that go against the social expectation. So if in your society or in your culture you expected specific action or a behavior, then it doesn't meet the expected expectation, then it will be considered as abnormal. Okay? So, but according to DSM-5, describes behavioral, psychological, or biological dysfunctions that are unexpected in their cultural context and are associated with present distress and impairment. So, abnormal behavior is not only an unaccepted cultural context. It's not just an unexpected behavior in your society or culture, but it go with present distress and impairment. Okay? So what is psychological disorder? So psychological disorder is an abnormal behavior. It is the dysfunction. So it is considered as an abnormal behavior where it is a dysfunction within an individual associated with distress or impairment in functioning and a response that is not typically or culturally expected. Next is the psychological dysfunction. It is a breakdown in cognitive, emotional, or behavioral functioning. And the last one, the distress or an impairment. It is an extreme feeling of being upset. So distress alone cannot be considered abnormal, so it should be paired with impairment. So distress or impairment. Next is atypical or not culturally expected. It is atypical or not culturally expected since it has infrequent occurrence and it keeps on violating our norms. So I will not further discuss this one since Mom Tin already discussed it. So next is what is psychopathology. Psychopathology is the study of psychological disorder. Okay, and it is already discussed also by Mom Tin. So in simple terms, psychopathology, it is the study of psychological disorder. Okay, so it talks about the origin of the disorder or the psychological disorder, its treatments, and it also study the outcomes after the treatment. So the related profession, the clinical psychologist and counseling psychologist, psychiatrist, psychiatric social workers, psychiatric nurses, marriage and family therapists. So the scientist practitioner are mental health professionals taking a scientific approach. So those who take scientific approach in mental health are called the scientist practitioner. So next is we will go to clinical description. So first is we have this presenting problem. It refers to the specific problems or set of problems manifested by the patient's specific problems or set of problems manifested by the patient. Okay, so next is we will go to clinical description. So what is clinical description? Clinical description refers to the unique combination of behavior, thoughts, and feelings making up a specific disorder. Next is prevalence, refers to the figures on how many people in a population as a whole have the disorder. So I will not further discuss this one since it already discussed by Ma'am Tin last meeting. So the incidence refers to the statistic on how many cases occur during a given period. Course refers to the individual pattern of a disorder. So we have there the chronic, the episodic, and the time limited. So when we say chronic, it is tend to last a long time, sometimes lifetime. Episodic is likely to cover within a few months and suffer reoccurrence at later time. Then a time limited is improvement in a relatively short period without treatment with little or no risk of reoccurrence. So onset beginning of a disorder, we have here acute, begins suddenly, and insidious, gradual development over an extended period. So the prognosis refers to the anticipated course of a disorder. Then we have here the etiology. It is the study of origins, includes the biological, psychological, and social dimensions. So we have here a diagram about studying of psychological disorders. So this is how psychological disorders are being studied. So it focuses first on the clinical description, the causation or the etiology, and the treatment and the outcome. So all of this will be covered in studying the psychological disorder. So the references are here. So I hope you learned something from me, and our main topic will be discussed by the next reporter.